And good morning to everyone. Again, we're going to begin with our awakening bell continuously to remind us of what is waking up inside of us. And you know, when potential is waking up and ready to pattern itself and bundle itself into new creative ideas and directions and all these wonderful things that we call the voice of God, that's what the voice of God is. It's clarity and direction. The ability to intuit and to see beyond the five senses. So as we continue to strengthen that and make it stronger and stronger and stronger, then we can absolutely become at a different level and frequency of everyday life. So let's do our bell. And one more time. Great, thank you so much. We do want to welcome you to our Wednesday class here at HeartLight Spiritual Center. Coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to welcome those that are here in person. Thank you. And to you that are joining us and you that will join us later. We want to welcome you to this journey that we are on. We're kind of on a path that we don't know exactly what the end of the path is going to be. And probably when we get there, we'll find out there is no end to the path. And that's the thing about getting into the flow of consciousness. When you're in the flow of consciousness, it's just like a river that just keeps on going and keeps on going. And you just have to jump in for a while and jump out. And I felt that way all my life about my ministry and my ability to sometimes just get up and without notes or whatever, which I did for decades. Lord, we never thought of a note of any kind or preparation of a message or whatever. But it was a different time. It's a different time. It was a time that there was less mental power. Let me say it that way. People weren't so much in their heads 30, 40 years ago. People was not in devices and electronics, and which is very mental stuff. All of this is operated from the mental level. And if we could see our mental bodies, I bet they're just huge because we mostly exercise from the mental level of things right now. But in those days, there was a more clarity of a channel in which this river of truth could flow through. And it just flows. It still does, but it's just in a different way right now. So a lot of things continuously reinvents itself as we move to different levels of consciousness. So we're talking about chakras right now, and I know we've all heard about this, not all, but a lot has sat in workshops and heard messages and read books on chakras, and we're trying to do our best to bring it in a little more fresh perspective, as well as bring it into a more present truth than the truth that was. And that's the thing that we do. Sometimes we get a hold of something and we capture it and we go back and we refer to it from the back. And that's okay. But you go back to get it so you can bring it into the present. You don't stay back with it. Does that make sense? That's where people get lost, is that they go back to a situation and then they stay in that back situation. Whereas the only reason to go back into your past is to bring things in your past into the present. Because whatever happened in the past, you were most likely at a different place than you are in the present. So it's a shift in perception. It's called a shift in perception. That great miracle that A Course in Miracles talks about is that shift of bringing things in the past into the present consciousness, because now we can look at it in a whole different way, because we've been more, we've expanded our consciousness, we expanded our learning of things, we see things maybe differently than the time in which something happened in the past. And therefore, we look at it fresh and new from a new point of view or a new perspective. So I hope we're doing that with the chakras. We're in the first 3 chakras, which are very, very important. I know that people want to jump into ascension and people want to jump into the more spiritual, higher things, but I personally don't believe that we can do that until we have fulfilled this journey of descension. I don't think we're fully in our bodies. And I have found that out in learning to work with people, with energy work and tuning forks and whatever. Oftentimes people are just not fully present in their body. People tend to kind of go here and go there and get caught outside of it. And you really have to try to do it, and that's why we use the Om tuner or some kind of real earthy, first chakra grounding sounds, such as the Om is one of them. This is one of the best, because I have to make sure that I have to get them here before we can begin to do anything. If they're going to be back in their past or thinking about their future and not present, it just doesn't work in energy work, especially. So it's important that we understand that these first 3 chakras are about our human story. It's about our human story. It's about the foundation of our incarnation and how that we adjust. I mean, you got to understand that you come from the infinite. When you say God, you mean the infinite, right? When you say God, you mean something that is undefinable, non-local. We say God. I don't think it says God. But we say God. We call it God. We call it universe. We call it source. We call it a lot of things. But we're calling something that has no name, no location in space and in time. It's infinite. And you can't describe something that's infinite, that has no beginning and no end. There is no way you can do it. And that's why God so loved us that live in the world, that he gave himself and his own offspring into a denser frequency so that we could know him. That makes sense? And I'm using that most famous scripture, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that none should perish but come to everlasting life. It's probably one of the most famous verses of the Bible, is John 3:16. But if you see it metaphysically, what it's saying, that God so loved the world that he gave himself in the expression of himself, which is the Son, is the expression of the source. Right? That's what the Son is. Fillmore says that. It says that in Unity, that the Son represents the expression of the source. So as it extended itself into its offspring, to be itself, it was able to lower its frequency down to a level that we could comprehend, even from the lowest level, beginning at the first chakra. So that's where it all begins. That's where the process begins. Because if your creator is infinite, then you are infinite. There's a part of the infancy that God is, you are. Isn't that what we say here? Because God is, I am. So anything that you would say God is, you are that. You are the individualization of it. You're not the fullness of it, but you are the individualization of it. And that means you hold all that it is in you, but you're not all that it is. And that's the difference between quantity and quality. Only in quality am I all that God is, but I'm not in quantity. If I was, then you couldn't have it. If I could have the all and all that God is, then I'd have it all. But the fact that God has individualized itself, we can all share in the oneness. even though we are individual in the body, we can still also enter into the state of unity and oneness of all that God is. So that's why it's so important for us to really get these three chakras, because I think only then do you become a true initiate to enter the ascension, which then begins in the fourth chakra, which is through the portal of the heart. The heart is really the way in. The first three chakras are outward stuff. You're dealing with your family, your tribe. You're dealing with other bodies. You're dealing with your own body, and the third one that we're going to talk about today. So everything that you're dealing with is all external human stuff. And then the ego says, well, why don't you just bypass all of that and just jump on up there, into the higher realms of things like that. So what we do, and we've all done it, is we go and we learn about these higher things. We gather more mental knowledge about them. And the ego says, well, aren't you smart? And we are. Just get with us and have a conversation. The stuff we know is amazing to the point that it's intimidating to our friends and families and people that we share these deeper ideas with. And yet, and this is just being honest, and you may disagree with me, but looking with all that I know mentally and where I live every day, there's a gap. Get me? There's a gap. And we've got to take this word, this information, and bring it all the way through the system until it becomes flesh. And that's why it's so important in the work that we do in Soul Energetics, is to work with this etheric blueprint that drives cellular replication. Got to get it there. And to get that perfect blueprint of creation there, you got to go through the mental, the emotional, the astral. You got to go through all these other embodiments of these chakras, and that's what the energy bodies are. They're the embodiment of the chakra spinning out into a body. So you have seven chakras, and therefore you have 7 energy bodies. So the crown spins out to the etheric that holds the perfect blueprint, right? Then you have the celestial or the causal, whatever, that spins out. And then you have all the rest of them, the astral, the mental, the emotional. And all of those coalesce into that etheric. And that's what the cell reads. When it replicates and makes itself new, it reads that. If that blueprint is inferior, then the cell will be inferior. If the cell is inferior, the cells that make the kidney will make an inferior kidney that has the ability to fail. Or a heart that's able to fail, or any other organ that you have is able to go into disease and fail because of the fact that it's continuously made of cells that are reading an inferior blueprint. Anyway, I didn't mean to get into that, but here we are. Third chakra. And third chakra, this is not a thing of forget 1, go to 2, forget 2, and go to 3. Can't do that. You can't have a 3 without 1 and 2. Am I right? In 3 is 1 and 2. So we're actually swallowing these chakras up into the next chakra, which gives it a higher vibration and higher frequency, and it takes on a whole different nature of itself. So the Sanskrit name is the Manipura, and this word in Sanskrit means lustrous gem. Lustrous gem. It means light. It means sun, solar. It's in the solar plex, right? So that gives you a hint. So the location is the navel to the solar plex, and the element is fire. We're going to talk about that. The outer form is plasma. The function is will, power, and assertiveness. On the inner state, it's laughter, joy, and anger. All of these. The glands are pancreas and adrenals. So remember in the first part of our class, we went through these different glands. So this one is dealing with our pancreas, and adrenals. So if you start looking at diabetes and things that are dealing with these glands, we begin to see that most likely that's telling us there's a dysfunction in our story at that level. So our first story is what? About coming into a tribe, right? And how dependent we are on the tribe to sustain our body. They don't have to sustain our soul and our spirit, but they have to sustain our body. Because that's what they did. They formed us a body, a container, a house that we can live in for 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 90, 100 years, or however long that we stay in the house. Or the tabernacle, it's really called. It's in the tabernacle. And everybody's trying to get into the temple, but the temple's already in you. Your spiritual body is the temple, not your physical body. That's where religion totally misses it. They just assume that because it says the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, that it's talking about the physical body. And that is incorrect, because the physical cannot receive the things of the spiritual. They are foolishness to them, Paul writes in Corinthians. So the only thing can receive something from the Spirit is in your spirit. You got to get it in your spirit first, not in your head. I can't get off of this morning. It's important. It's not memorizing something. It's not learning something. It's not making another brain cell. It's not repatterning some synapses because I used to believe this, now I believe that. And the ego says, well, you were there. And then you're wondering, well, why is my life? Why am I still dealing with this and with that in my life? If I know I'm whole, if I know that I don't need to be fixed, if I know all these wonderful things that we say all the time here, then why am I dealing with any arthritis, or why am I dealing with any kind of an illness or disease or sickness? That's what we're trying to capture here, is why is that? And the answer lies in our ability to spiritually work with the chakras, because the chakra holds the story, and we are our stories. The story you tell is what you and who you've become or will become. You are your story made flesh. Change your story, change your flesh. But it's not that easy to jump from here to there without going through the process of changing all the vibrations and frequencies through the chakras to get there. Other things that it is going to affect is the digestive systems and muscles. Some of its biggest malfunctions is ulcers, diabetes, hypoglycemia, digestive disorders. The color is yellow, gold. The sound is Ram, R-A-M. We've had Vam, Ram. This is the sound that if you want to audibly sound this, that gives you the vibration of the frequency. The vowel is an ah, as in father, ah, ah. Petals are 10. That means the lotus petals for this, with the Hindus, is 10. The tarot suit is the wands. The Sephira is the Had. The planets are Mars and also the sun. Foods are starches. You got liquids, you got more fruits and vegetables, and starches are dominant from these particular. So, isn't it interesting sometimes you have a taste for something, even something you don't even like all the time or eat all the time, but you just got to have it. That's your chakra speaking to you in some way and trying to get your attention that we need to do some work at that level. Herbs and incense are dragon's blood, which I love. It's a horrible name, but it's a wonderful, wonderful candle or scent, is dragon's blood. Sandalwood, that's great. Saffron, musk, cinnamon, and ginger. Our minerals for this one is the amber, topaz, and the quartz. The animal's the ram. And archangel is Michael. Michael, the archangel. So here we go. From earth to water to fire. I think I shared with you in working with clients through the years that I've had people that were very much stuck in their first chakra. How do you know that? The person is rigid. They're heavy. Their body is real solid and unmovable, and they just don't have the movement, and they're very earthy. They're very earthy. Nothing wrong with being earthy, but you can be too earthy. You can be too anything that's good or spiritual. It's all in the balance of these things. So what came to me was, what do you do with dried earth that has had no rain and it's all dried and cracked and whatever? You pour water. So I would go up to the second chakra, which is water, and bring more of that down into the earth until it softened the hard earthiness of the person. And then together they made something called maybe clay or mud, and that is something you can mold and shape. So you mold and shape, and then you want to solidify it again so you don't lose it, so you put it in the third chakra, which is fire. You know what you do? Have anybody done any of this making pottery and stuff like that, where you got to have all that water and the clay working together, and then you have to put it in and solidify it in the oven. Solidify it, make it a part of the foundation of your life. So I call this kind of a dance we're doing. We're making this dance, and we're climbing Jacob's ladder. You know, and as we move up, the dance grows. And in passion now, as we reclaim our bodies and reach through emotion and desire to find will, purpose, and action. From here, we grow in strength, and we feel our power rising out of our gut, releasing joyously from our heart. So all of these work together. That's the thing that is beautiful. It's almost like the chakras are the recipe. Remember I talked about that recently on Sunday, that people can fuss over there's not enough pieces of apple pie. If you get one, I have less. But if I had the recipe to the apple pie, I can make all the apple pies I want to. So I can share and not realize that you're taking something from me that is in itself endless. Well, the recipe is in the chakras, and you can begin to re-pattern these recipes into different results that you want in your life. Like oftentimes I've just shot right out of my second or third chakra and went right up to the sixth chakra because I wanted to see it differently. I wanted a different perspective. This is my insight, my intuition place right here. Or maybe I'm stuck somewhere and I can't express it or whatever. I'm going to shoot up to my fifth chakra. I'm going to see blue and the spinning of blue, and I'm going to realize that I have in me the ability to let my higher self, my true self, communicate through me. And all of us who kind of do speaking and are not really born professional speakers, we amaze ourselves sometimes when we find out how that it can express through us, even when we feel like we're not the best at expressing. So you got the third chakra. Or maybe you're in another situation where you need the heart chakra with another chakra. So you can combine all of these is very important. So as we enter the third chakra, rising up from the combined levels of the two chakras and embracing the growing current of consciousness that begins closer and closer, what's descending and what is ascending, as they're getting ready in the fourth chakra to meet together in the heart. Heaven and earth, up and down, the higher and the lower. So let's talk about this element of fire. Fire is a spark that ignites consciousness. Now, when we say consciousness, we're not really speaking of how we mentally think. That is not really conscious. A lot of people talk and they're not conscious at all what they're saying. And then they later think about it and they go, oh, I wish I hadn't said it that way. Maybe I said it the wrong way, because we're not conscious. We're reactive. The brain is reactive. It just shoots out things reactively. And oftentimes it does because it's not conscious of what is being said. So consciousness is a state of present awareness, the place of the observer. And that's an important thing for us to learn to practice. So we emerge from the unconscious and somatic levels to the exciting combination of psyche and soma. Psyche and soma. This begins the connection. You see, when you're in utero, what is going on in the womb is the forming of your body. The forming of your body. Now, the body has innately an intelligence in it, but it's still not conscious. It's intelligent. It has universal intelligence that knows how to put it together and how to take from one cell to two cells and how those cells all begin to work together in a pattern and a blueprint to form the fetus into a full body. In about 4.5 months, it starts feeling the confinement, and maybe it's bouncing into mother's womb, and it begins to realize that it's going to be the other. Makes sense to you? In other words, up until that time, it carries the cosmic consciousness of oneness, but at 4.5, it's called a quickening experience. In the book we've studied out of, Body, Mind, Spirit, it's a quickening experience of 4.5 when it first realizes there's something going on and I'm not it, and it's not me. And it's the confinement of the mother's womb that is first. So things are going on in the womb that is already going to help informing who and what this person is going to be and to become. And think about it. That is the point in which the body is separated. At that point, the body is separated because it realizes that the body is separate from other things. And that's why we have bodies that are separate and look different, and we see a lot of things that are different about each other because we are separate. But it does not separate the consciousness. It does not separate the soul's mission. Contracts and agreements are all intact in that position while all this is going on in this stage of development. So let's remember the first chakra was solidarity, stability, focus, and form. Here we experience unity. From this ground, we move to chakra 2 and experience difference, change, and movement. We embrace polarities and discovered the passions of difference, choice, emotion, and desire. So if we put together matter and movement, we find that they create the third state, energy. That's why I'm doing my best to get you guys to move next door. And I think the music is helping you so much better. When we first started it was just very mechanical. Here, let's do this exercise. And we was all going, we're just being a body mechanically, very Newtonian. But the music has slowed us down into finding a flow and a movement. And so matter and movement together ignites the spark. Everybody's heard we all have a spark of God in us. The spark then sparks the fire, which is the passion and compassion that drives our life. One thing I've learned about people in the third chakra that are stuck and in a state of inertia are people that are very easily lean toward not predestination, but they procrastinate. People that procrastinate are people that are very stuck in the third chakra because they have no movement, no inspiration, no aspiration, no passion to get things done, to do things. So that's one of the signs of dysfunction situation. This says if we rub two sticks together, we eventually get a spark that can ignite fire. Okay? In the physical world, we call this combustion. In the body, it's relative to metabolism. Think about that. I have a very slow metabolism. People who have a slow metabolism are people that can just gain weight like that. They do not have a fast way of changing the food into energy. So it's more stuck in the first chakra, or what I've told you is it's called the kapha in Ayurvedic, but it is the heaviness, the meat doesn't digest as well. People who don't really want to eat meat all the time are people that really have a sluggish first chakra in which the meat is not digesting itself very well. So I think as we move up the chakras, we're going to be eating less, more dense food, and I think we're going to have a taste for lighter food. And I think it's just going to happen. I don't think we have to make ourselves. I don't think we have to deprive ourselves. I think it's just going to happen as we are retuned. Our nature is retuned to a higher vibration and frequency. So psychologically, it relates to the spark of enthusiasm. It ignites power and will in our behavior. It is the realm of activity. Activity. This is our third chakra. The purpose of the third chakra is for transformation. Just as a fire transforms matter to heat and to light, right? The third chakra transforms the passive elements of earth and water into dynamic energy and power. Earth and water are passive. They go down the body. They go down the legs, through the feet, and connect with the earth. But something is changing in the third chakra. There is not so much a direction of only down into the earth, but it begins to become stationary as it begins to prepare itself for the climb into the higher chakras. Okay? The initial task of the third chakra is to overcome inertia. In physics, inertia refers to the tendency of an object to remain in the state it is in. No people like that. And maybe all of us have that. There are just some things we are not going to change it. We are just stuck there. This is the way it is. And that is what inertia is. It's just a tendency to not move in the direction. In the third chakra, the will combines with the force of stillness, movement, earth, and water, each shaping the other. This says the hardest part is getting started. Isn't that the truth sometimes? You know, I use the example that we all can have such great big ideas. You know, I always have big ideas. But an idea without the spark or the fire, until the idea becomes so part of your passion Because the passion will drive you to do something about the idea. It moves you into action, which is the third dimension, or the third chakra. And these are the people that have a lot of fire and get things done. These are people that just don't conceive ideas, but they birth them into action. Fire is the transformative influence that can destroy form and release energy, or we should say illusion. It burns through illusion. Of course, the Miracles tells us that. Burns through illusion. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about this fire thing because I also found it interesting how it is mentioned in the Christian scriptures. First of all, in Hebrews 12 and 29, it just clearly says, God is a consuming fire. God is a consuming fire. Now, you know, when the first books in here that I wrote is from little books, and one of those books was called Hell Yes or Hell No. Because that's one of the first things when I started writing and doing these kind of things I wanted to address is this fear that people have of being thrown into an eternal punishment of hell. And I felt, even though I didn't get that, I wanted to do more and not just get that, but I wanted to understand it enough to be somewhat intelligent on the subject of understanding why that doctrine is so powerful in literalist fundamental circles. And it's just fascinating that how Christianity splits things with a split mind. Of course it's going to do that because the ego is a split mind. So it splits things, and all of a sudden they believe in a Bible that says God is fire, and now fire is associated with the devil's domain. This is where Satan lives. This is his domain, is in the fiery. You see pictures of the devil, you know, in his red suit and horn and his pitchfork and people screaming in the fires, which was actually from Dante and the early Greek philosophers who was very influenced by Dante's work to the point that they believe it was inspired. That's how much they believed in it, that it was inspired. So his whole inner hell that he was going through, most likely, it would be my guess, that he was going through maybe deep depression and self-hatred and whatever hell is, and he began to put it into pictures, and he began to put it into different degrees of the 9 degrees of hell, which is still accepted by Catholicism and other religions out there, all came from Dante. But my point is, the very Bible says that God is fire. And so, another scripture I want to give you is, well, let me give you this one I just read. God is a consuming fire from the Mirror Bible. And it tells us that God's zeal for us burns like a fire. God's zeal, his zeal and love for us is so much that it burns like a fire. The other that fascinates me is that it says that about John the Baptist, that he baptizes you in water, but he that cometh shall baptize you in the Holy Spirit and fire. It's called the baptism of fire. So I'm going to read a little bit today about fire from my book. A little bit. Religion has long referred to hell as being an unending lake of fire. However, hell is not a lake of fire. Revelations 20 and 14 tells us that death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. Isn't that interesting? Hell is for death. Okay? If hell were such a lake, it would certainly not be cast into itself. Contemplate that. The word lake comes from the Greek word lamine, or lamina, which is Limne, meaning the idea of the narrowness of the shore. So it can't be talking about something that is eternal. The fact that it uses a lake says it is a closed body of water. And you can always get to the shore and get out of the lake. So it's interesting. Another form of this word is limos, which means destitution. A lake is a limited body of water space. The nearness of the shore indicates the capability of getting out of the space. And okay, so let me get down. The word fire comes from the Greek, from the word pur, P-U-R, pur, which means lightning or the discharge of electricity accompanied by a vivid flash of light. Now this is kind of what happened when you have an epiphany. Let me explain what an epiphany is. An epiphany is the thought that is God, not the thought of God, but the thought, when God takes on the form of a thought and it is able to somehow enter into your brain system, it ignites itself. It ignites itself. And the Essenes give us a picture of this, that when this connection happens, this divine thought with human thought comes together, it creates a charge. And the charge releases out of it the information, the photon, and it's like a lightning that happens. And when that happens, it would look like, the charge would look like this, which would look to us like angel wings. And the word angel comes from the Greek word that means messenger. Angels are not always white, fluffy things you see in pictures. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But a true angel is a message of God getting to the human brain and releasing through a charge enlightenment. Does that make sense to you? And you get that aha moment like, where did that come from? I don't even think I knew that. That wasn't a part of my mental training. I don't think I'd ever heard that before. And you surprise yourself because of this release of these angelic messages of God's enlightenment in the form of photon energy coming out to you. One thing before I get off of this that I want to say is that people who believe in this hell thing are also referred to as people who believe in hell and something that is called fire and brimstone. Fire and brimstone. So in the research of brimstone, it merely is a Greek word for sulfur or for things that were used to cleanse things in the temple. So it's not talking about punishment. It's talking about the ability to purify and burn out the dross. You know, many things, a diamond does not look like a diamond when it's found. It's a diamond in the rough. It looks like a piece of coal. It's dirty. It's not shiny and pretty until it's put into the fire. And the fire doesn't burn the diamond, but it burns all of the impurities out of the diamond so its purity can manifest. That's already there. See, that supports our idea that we're created whole and perfect. We are the diamond in the rough. And God says, I'll tell you what, I will baptize you with fire. Yes, there's going to be trials. Don't think that when you get here, this is going to be a Club Med experience. And people who's taught us that has caused us hell. Who's made us feel bad because we've gone through trials and situations and gone. We're here to go through that. There is a third chakra to the earth. There is that purification of being here on the earth in which we burn out all the dross. The hay, the wood, the stubble, it's called in the Bible. That's the only thing it burns out of you. But it never burns out who you truly are. It just burns away anything that is not letting you manifest as who you are. And through that understanding, that should give us a whole new attitude with things that come up in our life, instead of why me, why this, what did I do this time? Don't go into a place of I've failed somewhere, I feel bad about myself. I mean, this is the agenda of ego. It's to keep us in that low self-esteem, which has to do with the third chakra. Okay? So let's look from another direction. The third chakra energy, and the energy is personal power. Personal power. So again, let me go through the 3 phases of our story to adult. Conception to around 6 or 7 years old is the story that is in your first chakra. It holds it. It banks it. It banks all that data energetically of everything that you felt, believed, experienced, even whether it was right or wrong or perceived incorrectly. It still holds it as you saw it, as you experienced it. Then as you move into this 6 or 7 year old and you start doing things like going to school, you start having friends that are outside of your tribe, you move into learning to have relationships with other things other than yourself. It's a polarity. You have to learn that even though we're all one, that in this world we're all going to experience each other's differences. This is where the seed about how I'm going to feel about race. Let me tell you what, most of us, even though we could maybe changed, but in the first chakra, we believe about such things as race as our parents did and their parents did. It's very generational. It's very generational. Or what a woman should be, or what a man should be, or all these seeds. And I call them root assumptions. They're in the root. In the root of the first chakra is your first assumptions of what truth is based on what you're told it is on the family and culture. Are you with me on that? I mean, when I think about stuff I heard and experienced up to 6 or 7 years old, it's a lot of work. It's got to be done. Because even when I was in my mother's womb, I was drug around to tent revivals where my parents played music and my aunt was preaching, and I was hearing Harold Fire Brimstone, and I was hearing all of that long before I was ever born. It was being woven into the fabric of my fascia, of my connective tissue. I remember one of my first memories is being in a church meeting, and afterwards being held by my dad, who I felt safe with at that time, and some man wanted to hold me, but he had a ruddy red face, and I associated that immediately with the devil. And I thought the devil was trying to grab me out of my dad's hands. And maybe 3 years old or something like that. But that, you see, me talking about it tells you it is still very strongly there. That fear found its way to be the first seedings. that continuously gives us these different patterns that we deal with. So the third chakra becomes dominant. Okay, so let me get to the third chakra. The first chakra is tribal. Second is others and relationships. And now you enter into your adolescence, puberty stage, right around 12 years old. Now think about it. The Jewish people, around 12, 13 years old is a bar mitzvah. That is when you become an adult in Jewish teachings. Jesus was 12 when he left and disappeared for 18 years. He was 12 years old when he was in the courtyard of the temple, totally wowing the physicians with his knowledge that he had at 12 years old. Now, in my religion, you had to get saved and baptized right at 12 years old, because if you didn't at 12 years old, you could go to hell. Figure that one out. It was called the age of accountability. You were covered up to 12 years old. But 12 years old, a different story. So immediately this is thrown on you, is that you're a sinner now, you got to get saved, you're bad, your flesh is bad, your body is bad, all of that stuff is in that second chakra. Now you start feeling you in the third chakra. Hormones, all this stuff starts coming up in you, and you begin to become what you do to develop your self-image of yourself. This is going to be the early root assumptions of how comfortable you are in your skin, in the body in which you've chosen to incarnate, as a woman, as a man, as gay or straight, or as a different race or different culture. All these kind of things now begins to come up for you to enter into self. So you got tribe, others, and self. Okay? This becomes dominant vibration in our development during puberty. It assists us further in the process of individualization, a forming of self, ego. Now, we need to realize that we've really made ego the new villain. And there is a side of the ego. When we talk about ego, really what we're talking about is the pseudo-ego. It's not the true ego. It's a pseudo-ego. That means we make it up based upon what we've heard and learned that we are. So we end up developing a self that we were not created to be, which is our true ego. There really is a true ego, because all ego means a self. So if you don't want to have any ego, you are selfless, which is very Buddhist, by the way. They kind of believe in that. I believe there's a true self. A true self, which is the individualization of the one. The Creator is my true self. But I have suppressed that into a self they told me I am. So a lot of work needs to be done in these areas to do with our esteem, whether it's low or high. Some people have too high of esteem, as well as too low of an esteem. So in all of this, there is a balance. The third chakra completes the physical trilogy of the human energy systems. Chakra 1 and 2 and 3. It primarily relates to a physical form of power. The first chakra resonates to a group, a tribal, and the second resonates to the flow of power between self and others. The third chakra relates to our personal power in relation to the external world. So let's talk a little bit more about this. I'm using 3 sources here for you that are probably out there asking. Always the Body Mind Workbook that we started with, and Carolyn Mace's Anatomy of the Spirit, and I think they all, and also Wheels of Life. Thank you. Tim's giving me a high five. There you go, Tim. So, the Manipura chakra. As we rise above the lower levels of energy representing the first two chakras, we come to the Manipura, the city of jewels, it calls it, is the fire center, as located in the navel and the 8th thoracic vertebrae. So every chakra has a front and a back. In Soma Energetics, we start with the back of the chakra. And I said, why? And the download was because that's the oldest stuff that has been backed up. See, now that's something I wouldn't think about saying at all. That's a good example. I would not have thought of that. But really, your back represents where you've been, right? When you're moving, your back is where you come from. So that's your past. So that's the back of the chakra that has some of the oldest stuff. So when you bring in the new energy in those back chakras, it's going to pull whatever needs to be dealt with into the front chakras. And when you turn the person over, then it's there to be released if the person is ready for it. Not everybody's ready to get rid of stuff that say they are. But if they are, now it's easily detected by the practitioner who understands how to work with the energy system and the chakras. To be a good energy person, you've got to learn this kind of thing that I'm talking about right here. It's very, very important that we do that. So the Manipura is the center of power, control, status, the ego, or self-identity. From this center, our energy is concerned with whether we are liked or disliked. You know how hard it was? Think back when you started your teenage years. Wow. You know, you start thinking about whatever sex you were attracted to, or the sex you were supposed to be attracted to, whichever. And then it becomes almost competitive, and am I pretty enough, or are they going to like me, or unfortunately I don't look like the woman on the magazine. All that kind of stuff comes up that begins to develop and form this pseudo self that we are not, but that we become. And if we don't become the self that we are, conflict, internal conflict is born. And these are people that have a lot of self bad image, that are very depressed, that are very shy, that don't feel they're worthy, all those kind of things. And that develops into a personality. And people have a personality. Some people are very open and very happy with who they are and satisfied, and other people are just want to shrink back and not be seen and not be heard, and they just kind of like they wilt away from it. They don't bloom into life. They wilt from life. And that is all based upon how we experience this chakra. Our personal power tends to be limited to our own world and does not exist to the world at large. So if our energy is fixed and functioning from the chakra, we will attempt to rule, exert power, and will become, at that point, dominating. I want to look at that again. As personal power tends to be limited to our own world and does not extend to the world at large, so if our energy is fixed and functioning from this chakra, we will attempt to rule and exert power and become dominating, and will try to make others conform to our own way of thinking. It is a state of ego-centeredness. I want you to get this. You don't want to be ego-centered. In the ego you are not, but you want to be centered in the self or ego you are. There's a difference in being self-centered and centered in self. So, it is a state of ego-centeredness where there is an ability to unite or share with others, and therefore we can have peace. If we're not sharing and have good relationships with others and ourselves, we don't have peace. So I think we're going to stay on this chakra a little bit longer. I want to talk a little bit about it more, and our time is gone. I don't know where it goes, but it just goes so quickly, doesn't it? Our third power. Before we go, we did an exercise over there today, which is one of I don't know if you can see this or not where you are, but it's just standing up, and and this is called making the sun. Making the sun exercise. So you are the rays of the sun, the central part of yourself. That's a good exercise. Anything to do with this upper part of the stomach is great, and there are exercises for that. And when we're doing that over there, I realize we start with first chakra, which we do ankle rolls and feet. Then we do knee rolls, first chakra. And then we go up to the hips, and we do hula hoops and circles with our hips, second chakra. And we continue all the way up to third chakra exercises. So these are your physical outer exercises, while once you get into the heart and get into the inner self, you do more spiritual exercising. That's meditation. That's faith building. That is all the wonderful things that you do to strengthen your inner self, your spiritual self. So it has to be both, inner and outer exercise, kind of put together in some way. All right, let us pray. Affirm, or however Spirit wants to speak to us. Holy Spirit, we thank you. Again, we recognize you as the teacher in all of this. I'm just here kind of just throwing out some information that resonates with me through these wonderful authors who have done great research and has given us not one way, but several ways of looking at this whole idea of the chakra system. We offer this to you. We're not looking to them as our source of information, but we're using their information to see if it ignites the teacher within ourselves that will teach us exactly what this is all about that we're talking about today. Put it together for us into a way in which we have our own self-knowledge and experience. Ignite it, activate it with divine spark and fire and passion. And Holy Spirit, Divine Mother, Father, God, we ask if there's anything in our third chakra that in any way is hindering our ability to have a healthy and wholesome relationship with ourself, with our bodies, with our life as we have chosen to live it in this incarnation. We ask that you help us through the exhale of our breath to let go of what is not serving us and allowing us to have this wonderful self-relationship. That we accept ourselves for exactly who we are and help us to be the best that we can be in our body, to take care of it, and to take care of all the aspects of our human self, and allow it to become as best as we can in this world we live in. We ask this in the name of the loving, wonderful presence of the divine, the one that dwells in us. And I will close today with a third chakra affirmation. I am in charge of my life. You might say this with me, everybody. I am in charge of my life. I decide what is important and meaningful. I set clear boundaries and honor those of others. I surrender my personal will to divine will. And so it is. Thank you. Appreciate your continuous support for the class, and to you that are joining us. Remember, we'll be back at 11:15 on Sunday morning for our celebration service. So bless you. Until next time, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know how you're doing, and any questions that you might have. We're certainly open to address them if you're out there and want to participate. So thank you until our next time.